This is the Tom Bigby Tales. I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small town on the Tombigbee River in northeast Mississippi called Columbus. Sometimes I record about the rest of the state. This episode is about Henry Edward Pete Warden, who retired as a colonel in the U.S. Air Force and is known as the father of the B-52. Henry Edward Warden was born on December 26, 1915 in McKinney, Texas, the son of Colonel John A. and Jane Abernathy Warden. At the age of 13, when his father was stationed in Long Island, he took his son for his first airplane flight with James Doolittle, introducing him to the world of flight. Pete was enamored with the idea of being an engineer, so he first attended Texas A&M for 2 years, and then he transferred to Catholic University in Washington, D.C. to get his bachelor's in aeronautical engineering. He then worked on his master's degree at MIT, where he helped design the school's first closed-circuit tunnel that is still in use today. As the younger son of, at that point, General Warden, Pete had not exactly planned on a military career, but when Germany invaded Poland in 1939, he abandoned his master's program at MIT and joined the Army Air Corps. He earned his wings in June 1940 at Love Field in Texas, and then deployed shortly after for the 20th Pursuit Squadron at Nichols Field in the Philippines. He was primarily a P-40 pilot, P-40 Mohawks. He had initially even flew P-36 Mohawks, but after a few months, he also became the depot inspector for the airplanes there at Luzon. The Japanese then attacked on December 8, 1941, and then Nichols Field was pretty much destroyed and was difficult to be used as an FOB. And he was forced to move with all the airplane parts to the outskirts of Manila in order to try and provide some resistance. After the main Japanese landings in I think it's called the Lingayen Gulf, about a month later, 2 or 3 weeks later, General MacArthur, the commander in the Philippines, ordered all forces to withdraw to the Bataan Peninsula and declared Manila an open city. Warden was elected to stay behind enemy lines in order to salvage enough of the P-40s that would otherwise be lost during the immediate retreat. And his team did manage to save 8 of them by parting out the ones that were bombed and destroyed or were already in depot. Warden himself flew out the last aircraft out of Manila just hours before the Japanese entered the capital. Brigadier General Harold H. George, the air commander for the region, told Warden to take a few enlisted men to the island of Mindanao to find and save more aircraft. Warden discovered 3 aircraft still in packing crates, and while test flying one, he shot down what was thought to be a Japanese Betty bomber. With the end of the resistance in the Philippines in May of 1942, Warden then left for Australia, where he assembled, modified, and overhauled aircraft at the 5th Air Service Command. He proved to be such an innovative fella that he didn't even need to have tech manuals and procedures to achieve some pretty significant results and keep the aircraft flying. This was very important when they were so far ahead of the operational area and were literally using the equivalent of chewing gum and duct tape to hold some of these planes together. When he returned to the United States after being in the Pacific, he was then reassigned to Wright Pat in Daytona Beach, Dayton, Ohio, which is considered the engineering hub of the whole Air Force. The Air Force at that point was trying to determine how to build an intercontinental bomber And would that be one that was using propeller-driven engines or using turbojets? If they used turbojets, they'd be able to fly at higher altitudes and at a higher speed, making them far more effective in war. However, the turbojets ate up a lot of fuel, and that shortened their range. So that would require a tanker fleet for air refueling, which is what a KC-135 and a KC-10 do for the Air Force today. The preliminary program for the long distance bomber, the XB-52, showed that the cost overruns would be significant. And the Air Force leaders still couldn't agree on the size of the aircraft and what kind of jet engines it would use and the quality and the distance required, et cetera, et cetera. Many of them favored the B-36 propeller plane, which they could deliver immediately, or they would have to wait for this XB-52, which as an experimental aircraft would take years to develop. The chief of the bombardment branch, Colonel Put, appointed Pete Warden as the chief of the branch's engineering division and made him responsible for the Northrop XB-35 and the Convair XB-36 programs. Now, Warden really liked the three bomber concept, which would call for a light, a medium, and a heavy bomber to go into the Air Force inventory. And he thought that the most important of the three airplanes, quote, would be the heavy bomber, whose mission will be the delivery of the special bomb load to the strategic target system, end quote. Boeing was awarded the contract to build the experimental long-range heavy bomber, and Warden was the designated project officer and would lead them in this new generation of bombers that used a turbojet propulsion. He was incredibly involved in the B-52 and the B-47 development and got him the reputation as being one of the founding fathers of the B-52. According to Walter B. Boyne, the author of Beyond the Wild Blue, Warden used his authority when he told Boeing on October 21st, 1948, to design the B-52 with jet engines. According to Boyne's book, Pete Warden undoubtedly knew that he had more information on aircraft and engine projects than any other individual, and that to advance the U.S. Air Force's need for a long-range bomber, he was responsible for making value judgments causing programs to happen and then seeing to their approval. In the case of the long-range bomber, Boeing had not been able to get the required range from the B-47 sized jet bomber projects that they were investigating. Intuitively, they felt that a larger turboprop bomber would have the required range. Unfortunately, the Wright T-35 turboprop engines, although they had been increased in power, still did not provide the necessary range, and worse, would not be ready for production until 4 years later in 1952. Again, according to Boyne, Warden apparently considered all this, urged Pratt & Whitney to pursue what became the J-57 engine, and once he had their commitment, instructed Boeing to design a very large aircraft based on the J-57. The B-52 was the result. B-52 is an amazing aircraft. It's called the Stratofortress for a reason. It has 8 very large jet engines and can carry a heck of a payload. According to Lori Tagg, author of Development of the B-52, she dedicated her book to Pete Warden. She also insisted the U.S. owes a considerable gratitude to this, quote, progressive and persuasive jet nut. Boeing may have done the drawings and some of the engineering, but Warden played a critical role in keeping the B-52 project alive and well despite some really heavy criticism from both the public, other engineers, and Congress. When the new bombers went into production and test flights, the commandant of the Air University asked that Warden join a research program at the Air War College. So, in 1953, Warden, now a colonel at the age of 38, his brilliance and his technological expertise caught the attention of Brigadier General Bernard A. Shriver, who personally ensured he was put in charge of a long-range planning at the Air Warfare Systems Division in the Pentagon. So then he starts his Pentagon experience. The commander of the Air Force Missile Test Center at Patrick Air Force Base was also very impressed with Warden and arranged for him to become the deputy commander for tests in 1957. Later, when Shriver was the three-star commander of the Air Force Research and Development Command at Andrews Air Force Base, he made certain that Warden was given a central role in reorganizing what would become the Air Force's Systems Command. Warden then was eligible for promotion to general. However, Warden was not one to get into the politics of the military. He felt it was easier to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. And he knew that as a general, he would not be able to get away with that. He would also be pigeonholed because of his involvement with the B52, which made him stand out as a controversial figure, and one that, because of the way he took over that project and that program and ushered it through from development into actual delivery of the aircraft, made him kind of a controversial figure. He was considered a maverick. So the promotion board voted against him, and Warden was okay with that. And because he didn't promote, he was retired from the Air Force in 1964 at the age of 49. He then became the corporate director of plans for North American Aviation, and he stayed with them for another 6 years. And then he and his wife, Joanna, would fully retire to manage a 550-acre farm in Lowndes County, Mississippi, near Columbus. Pete had an exceptional career. After he and his wife moved to Columbus, she was a consummate educator. And so the two of them began a school, the Warden Carden School, which they operated for 20 years. I benefited from teaching at the Carden School, as well as my children attended there before we moved to Europe. Pete had some amazing medals and awards. He was awarded the Legion of Merit, the Distinguished Flying Cross, an Air Medal, American Campaign Medal, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, World War II Victory Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Defense of the Philippines Medal, Distinguished Unit Citation, 4 awards. Colonel Henry Edward Pete Warden died November 15th, 2007, and he is buried at Friendship Cemetery in Columbus, Mississippi. I want to thank you for joining me on Tom Bigby Tales, and until next time.